Call the meeting back to order and welcome you to tonight's regular meeting for the School District of Amery. We do not have a spotlight on education last night. We did double duty last month, so we got by that. So we'll start with consent agenda items, and I had the vouchers, and we'll make a motion that we accept those.
I'll make.
Second. All right. There's any discussion? All right. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. Community comment? Yep.
My name is Corey Nelson, and I live in the city of Amery. I was proud to work on behalf of the district for nearly 25 years, but I was relieved to be able to retire nearly 2 years ago from what I felt was truly an unhealthy and unprofessional working environment. I believe it's happening yet today. I've related specific incidences and concerns to each of you, yet the majority of you have made the choice to pretend those issues didn't and still don't exist. You chose to blame me for the issues, referring to me in the Amery Free Press, Darren, as a disgruntled employee. I ask you, does a disgruntled employee agree to provide consulting services for her former employer for 2 years following her retirement? I think not. Make no mistake, I am proud to be part of this community and to serve this school district. I'm not a disgruntled employee. That was a convenient label to attach to a knowledgeable whistleblower. I am a disgusted taxpayer who last week saw my school taxes increase despite being repeatedly told that they would not. Those bold assurances are still available on the district's website, but probably not for long. I'm a community member who is concerned about unwarranted spending and continued unethical and unprofessional actions. It seems to be easy for the board to make decisions that protect one employee while dismissing the issues facing others. This is both sad and embarrassing for the school district of Amery. I am not the cause of the current discord within the district. If I was able to convince others to be unhappy in their workplace simply based on my say-so, I surely would have had the ability to convince the board that there are issues threatening the integrity of this district. Yet 4 members still look the other way. As I said, sad and embarrassing. I'm also concerned about recent policy actions taken by the board that leave the staff and the public in the dark until after the fact. Policy 171.2, the revision to that policy, provides that the meeting information now only has to be made available to the board prior to the meeting, quote, prior to the meeting, not 2 days in advance as it has been afforded in the past. This afternoon I reviewed the board agenda, and at that time the board vouchers and the financial statements had not been released to the public. The same was true for last month's meeting when they were not yet released when the meeting started. Paragraph 4 of Wisconsin Statute 120.11, titled School Board Meetings and Reports, states that, quote, the school board shall make a detailed record of all receipts and expenditures available to the public for inspection at each school board meeting and upon request, end quote. Because the district's monthly financial reports and the listing of board vouchers approved tonight were not readily available to the public prior to the meetings this month, it may have come later this afternoon, I don't know. I'm requesting this detailed record be made available to me for inspection. So I'm requesting the detailed record of all receipts and expenditures for inspection that were approved this month. If it's not available tonight, I'd be willing to have those records mailed to me tomorrow. Another recent policy change, policy number 672, now allows the district administrator to make purchases of up to $50,000 without prior board review or approval. I cast my vote for board members who take an oath to protect and represent me, other taxpayers in my community. I'm concerned that the board is now on a path to defer those obligations, those responsibilities, to one position that has no requirements to represent the taxpayers or the employees. I urge each of you to do what you were elected to do. Take a hard look at this new path you're on and make the changes that need to be made to get our district back on track. Thank you.
Okay. Administrative reports.
Just one. Oh, First, I'll defer to our administrators this month. You start this time.
Okay. I would just like to share that we are having technology presentations for the elementary and intermediate school purchase of a device this coming year, next spring, probably. We have had an Apple iPad presentation, and about 2 weeks ago, and in this coming Wednesday, we are going to have a presentation from Microsoft. So we just are trying to get ahead of the ball game and make sure that we make an informed decision when that time comes. I also want to notify you that we did do another little tweak to our bus dismissal situation. We had changed it this fall so that all of the children and students of the district would transfer buses at the elementary school. And we made one tweak starting today. Instead of the buses facing north in the back of the elementary school, they're facing south. And we felt that that decision was made for safety purposes. And so tonight we saw a little bit of what happens down our service road during that transition time, but we had, I was out there and another employee, and we're monitoring it, and actually for the first day it went pretty well, and we think it was a wise decision, again, for the safety of our students. So I just wanted you to be aware of that.
At the middle school, we have a pretty fun event that's going to be kicking off early in January called Genius Hour, which is one of the ways that we're going to be delivering project-based learning at the middle school level. And you've seen a lot of the project-based learning in Montessori classrooms at the elementary. You've heard about AIM and the great things happening at the intermediate school. Mr. Derfler's talked a lot about the CTE academies and things at the high school. We're hoping to have a possible presentation a little bit more about project-based learning, the 2 or 3 different ways that we are delivering it at the middle school, including the Genius Hour program. So we're real excited about that. The other thing, the big thing for our kids coming up here right after break is Prairie Fire Theater kicks off, and that's primarily grades 3 through 8, and they'll be performing Peter Pan, and that gets huge participation from our students. So those are 2 of the things that I would bring out.
2 items. If you have been to the high school in the month of December, you'll notice a brand new, beautiful Christmas tree from Echo Valley Tree Farm, the hunters and gatherers that we have at the high school. People that like to live in the woods, got their chainsaws together and their trailers and their trucks, and we drove down, buzzed her down. They went a little tall, 24 feet. I told them it's an 18-foot ceiling. We're not good at math, but we chainsaw fixed that problem. We did chainsaw in the school, just so you were aware of that. We went with the electric variety rather than the gas. We didn't want to set off the alarms. We've added a new addition in the last 2 years. The art students, under the direction of Ms. Schmidt, have set up, in essence, a tree decorating station at the end of the day. If you want to make an ornament, the principal did not, because artistic skills are something that escaped me, so I didn't want to embarrass the school with my artistic skills. So kids made ornaments and put them up, and it looks fantastic. And we've had a lot of traffic in the month of December, so it looks really nice. Second item, we started our journey today on the ACT. We did the first of 2 days of test prep. We actually took a practice test, 2 sections. We did today English and math. And the purpose of that is to get students prepared for what it really is like, the actual questions and the actual time length, being able to gauge how long that takes to get that done. And then we have 2 more sections tomorrow. And then we place students into test prep groups based on their scores, and then at that point get them ready and hopefully replicate the good success we had this last February by doing it again this coming February. And we actually had a perfect score on the math section, so I thought that was pretty cool.
Cool.
All righty. Thank you.
Anybody else?
I'd like to thank the administrators for giving their reports first this time so I don't steal any of their thunder. And I just wanted to mention there are so many positive and good things happening with our staff, with our students throughout the district. Every building, so many different great activities, concerts this time of the year, performances all year. as far as with the staff, we have, with our administrative team, we've started to review the school calendar for 2018-19. We're thinking ahead and looking ahead to that. I know last year in December we had brought it to the board for approval in December, but we're incorporating more discussion and several other things in the school calendar for next year, and we are looking at that, working on it. That's all I have at this time. Great time of the year, and I want to say Merry Christmas to everybody.
Okay. Anything else? Any other board reports? All right. Move on to informational items. Energy efficiency or resolution.
Okay, we have, as I think we had discussed previously at a prior board meeting, the energy efficiency resolution is essentially eliminated by the governor's veto pen by making a 1,000-year moratorium, changing the year from 2017 to 3017. However, we found out that there is a window of opportunity prior to December 31st. Any school district in the state that passes an energy efficiency exemption resolution for the future can do that as long as it's passed prior to December 31st, 2017. So we did have a building grounds meeting. We had discussed this. Our maintenance director, George, and I, and Twyla, we've discussed it. I consulted with Lisa Boysen from Baird. In fact, talked to her, our financial consultant, talked to her again today about this. So following discussion by the Building Grounds Committee, we decided the resolution that would be brought forward would be the same dollar amount as the current year for next year. And we're having some technical difficulties. I apologize, but we have a resolution here for $340,000 next year, and the items that are put in there, as you'll see, the second to last paragraph talks about replacement of one bus and LED retrofit of interior lighting. And what we've done is we've never borrowed. The school district for 5 years, I believe, has done energy efficiency exemptions, has never borrowed money for this, but rather has used the EEE as a way to backfill, to keep the mill rate level and to not raise the mill rate. And we'd still be able to do that. And people have an understanding of taxation and of mill rates, and people know that our aid and our funding is determined by the student count and also the taxes in each of the municipalities is determined by the value of the property, the assessment, and so things change each year that there's no control over by the school district. And so I was contacted by the city of Amery, for instance. Their tax bill went up for various reasons because of a company that received back tax payments from the city, which was then charged back to the school district because of a different type of assessment that was a result of a state law change. So in other words, a business that could now be assessed as an empty warehouse was able to get back taxes for the past 3 years, and they did, rather than as a valuable business. And so things change. There are different variables that can impact tax statements. And anyway, we've used this energy efficiency exemption as a way to backfill that amount, and we're able to do this. This is one-year resolution. There's a second one-year resolution for 2019-20 for the same dollar amount. And if things would change a lot, the board could also under-levy, could always under-levy. We don't have to worry about overspending by this dollar amount because in consulting with Lisa Boysen from Baird, she's one of the best in the state in school district funding, we could under-levy by this complete amount, and so it is relatively safe. She recommended not going beyond 2 years, and that is what the Building Grounds Committee, Keith and Darren and George and I and Bill had all discussed. So we have these two resolutions before us for the board to consider. One you see up there is for 1819, and if I can get to the other one. We have the one for 1920 as well to be presented. And these documents all are on board book and are able to be reviewed by the public. Any questions?
No, I think that's what we had discussed.
Okay, so here's
Some
1819.
districts are looking at 1,000-year. Right, we decided that we'd just stick with the biennial budget and worry about in 2 years if it goes away, or whatnot. But we didn't want to start projecting things out that we didn't have any idea of what would change, what rules or whatnot. So.
Plus, no one knows what the biennial budget will be, the next biennial budget. So, again, this is a relatively safe action by the board to pass a resolution for the same dollar amount as this year. And once again, the board can choose to levy for less than the maximum if this would exceed the amount that the board wants to spend.
I think Keith and I were pretty comfortable with that.
Yeah.
So. All right, so I'll take a motion to accept those.
So moved.
In a second.
Second.
Okay, any discussion? All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Okay. Legislative update.
Okay, I just wanted to mention that there is a lot of publicity about the Blue Ribbon Commission on School Funding. It's been talked about for years, and there is now a commission co-chaired by Luther Olson, who is very well known as the education chair of the legislature for many years. And the goal of this commission is to actually change school funding before the next biennial budget. So it'll be interesting as to see what comes out of that. I know some superintendents and other representatives that are on that commission. I know the Grantsburg superintendent is representing this area of the state, and also state associations like WASDA, the District Administrators Association, and ASA, the School Principals Association, have representation, or at least have a voice in that. So just wanted to report about the School Funding Commission.
Do you have any input with the people who are district administrators on the committee?
Actually, WASDA, John Bales, Executive Director from WASDA, mentioned that he and John, the Executive Director for ASA, they're in direct contact with those representatives on the committee.
I get concerned in the Grantsburg one because Grantsburg was the one that changed all that funding last year for online schools.
Yeah.
And
Why?
Took their, not the funding, but took their test scores and separated them so that they didn't have to be lumped together with their poor online school. And
She's the only one I know
fair.
of. And
I know that he's got the ear of some of the legislators down there. I'd just be real careful about that.
Yep. The good news is there are representatives from across the state, and having Luther Olson co-chair that committee is a good thing for educators in Wisconsin.
Okay. Anything else? All right. Report card, Mr. Benson.
Yeah, I'll start out and then we'll move around a little bit. We're in I believe the 5th year that the state accountability has come through what's called a school report card. We were here just last month and we talked about our state assessment and how our scores from last year turned out. Some of those scores go into actually a majority of those scores go into the report card. We presented this, 5 different times, so won't go over it as quite as detailed as we have in the past. But you can see the school district report card only includes full academic year students. That means the students that had to start the school year at the beginning of the year on our first Friday count, and they test the end of that school year. Technically, they're only here for about 6-7 months before they take the test, but we're held accountable for anyone that starts the school year with us. And the data will be displayed broken down by desegregated groups, which means that you're not only responsible for overall how your kids perform, but also your English language learners, special ed students, students from low socioeconomic backgrounds, how well they perform also has a huge impact, and you'll find out on the report card. The first area is student achievement. That's basically taking how well your students did on the state test at the grade levels in each building. It's 3 years of data, so it's not just 1 year. They give the most and the heaviest weight to the most current year and a little bit less to each year before that. In addition, you get points for how many kids are basic. You get 1 point, and you get 2 points for those that are proficient, and more points if they're advanced. Student growth is the second factor off the school report card. And basically what it's doing there is it's measuring how well your students have grown over time. So without going through all the words, and that does not apply to the 11th grade, primarily because the 11th grade right now, they're not including the ACT Aspire in the report card right now from 9th and 10th grade, which actually is problematic, and we'll hear a little bit more about that. But right now, they only count, they don't have a growth score at the high school because it's just 1 year of data, where at the other buildings we have 3rd to 4th to 5th all the way along. It's called a value-added score. And so if you go to the next slide, it will basically show you at the next slide. Basically what they do is it kind of looks like that, and they know exactly where a student should grow based off of the data from years and years and years of experience. So they know if it's a boy or girl, if that student was special ed, if they were free and reduced, where they scored the year before. It has an expected score that you're to meet. If your student grows further than that, you get good positive points for growth. If they don't, you get negative points for growth. It's broken down by kid, and then you get the mean average for your score. The next area is closing the gaps. And this is how well your students that are special ed and how well they performed versus the regular ed students. The interesting part is it's not just special ed, it's also your free and reduced or minority groups. And basically what it does is it takes a look at how well did they perform versus their corresponding cohort group. But it's Amery special ed versus all regular ed in the state of Wisconsin, not Amery special ed versus Amery regular ed. The problem there is that if you really started increasing achievement of one group, you would naturally have a gap for the other group. So it takes your desegregated group and compares it to overall the state. And is there a gap? And it doesn't necessarily say that your kids from that group are performing lower than other special ed kids or free and reduced kids or what have you. It just shows that is the growth, the gap going up or down? And that can change from year to year, and your score will adjust because of that. And then the final one is kind of an on-track post-secondary readiness, so it takes a look at graduation rate overall at the high school or 3rd grade. It gives a little more points off the reading, 8th grade on the math, and then attendance gets figured in there too. So that's a little bit about how the report card comes up. So you're going to see a couple different report cards on how we did. And then I think I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Derfler.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Benson.
Yeah.
You'll see 4 scorecards and then 3 slides with each of the 4. You'll see a celebration slide. You'll see in areas of improvement, and then next steps, the plan of action to remedy what you see as the areas of biggest concern. So the first slide, the areas of celebration, there are 3 items. On English language arts, which is the combination of reading and English, those 2 scores together are called English language arts. We outperformed the state average pretty significantly, 19.8 to 18.3. Every single test for every single year that we've tracked all the way back to the early 90s, English is the lowest of the 5 tests. Every single year, and it's the lowest in the state as well. It's always been the case. Math, we outperformed the state, 21.9 to 20. Graduation rates. Graduation rates are a bit tricky because there's a 4-year rate, a 5-year rate, and a 6-year rate. 4-year is typically your regular ed student that just stays 4 years and then they graduate, they grab their diploma, and they're on their way. And then you have students that stay an extra couple of years, typically students in your ID program. That would be with Mrs. Long Henry at the high school, and they stay 6 years. And they have a transition plan and get them ready for life success. So the 4-year rate at the high school is 91.5% of our kids graduate from Amery, and 88.2 graduate statewide. For the 6-year rate, it's 93.8 versus 92.3. The rate goes up in both cases because those students stay with reason. Lastly, you can lose points on the scorecard for having a poor graduation rate, and you could also lose points for having a poor attendance rate. So we have lost no points on attendance. Our attendance rates at the high school have hovered around 93, 94% forever. It was 93.7%. You have to be below 87% for there to be any issues. There weren't any issues or have never been on the scorecard. And dropout rate, you have to have 6% or less dropout rate. We had 0.3%. We don't have a tremendous amount of kids that are considered a dropout. Areas that need improvement, there are a few. Tom spoke about closing gaps. The area where the high school needs the most work is closing gaps. We're trying to close the gap between our performance of our regular ed kids and our special ed kids. And that's not a surprise to me or probably anyone else in the room that our regular ed kids performed better. That's true probably everywhere, and it is certainly true at the state level. So in English and in math, English language arts and in math, our regular ed kids outperformed our special ed kids. In the area of English language arts, significantly so, 19.2 to 15.8. We had 92 test takers last time around. 13 of those students were special ed students. Their composite score, or their score in the English language arts was 15.8. We have to increase that score in order to do better on the scorecard, and further, to better serve those kids. The same was true in the area of regular ed as opposed to students with free and reduced label, students with an economic disadvantage. Not as significant. You're looking at low 20s to the upper 17s, but there is a difference. We want to improve that performance as well with those students who have that label of free and reduced. And lastly, we want to improve the graduation rate of our special education students. And I'm going to say this number, and I'm not excited about this number. The number of students at the high school in the regular ed population that graduate is 93.7. The number of students that graduate with a special ed label is 78%. Now I say that, and I pause for dramatic purposes, so to speak, because that rate on the scorecard is determined by a 4-year cohort. If you graduate in 4 years, you're a graduate. If you stay beyond that 4th year, you are not a graduate. And that counts against you. And that's after about 4 hours of conversation with the DPI to confirm that that's true. Philosophically, I've talked to Cheryl Wesley at length about this. We're going to keep our kids beyond 4 years unless you direct us to do something different than that, because it's in what's in the best interest of kids. And further, there's some laws that are there that are not jiving, some federal law and some state law that are not jiving. But that wouldn't be the first time for such things like that. So our action steps. We started that plan today by getting kids ready to take the ACT. We want to improve the performance of our special ed and our free and reduced kids on the ACT in the area of math, and we want to do that in the area of English language arts. We want to do that in general, but those are the 2 areas that the scorecard reports out on. We want to continue to work on, this is item 3, how do we track kids once they leave here? There are kids that are coming and going districts across the state. Once they leave, how are we coding them? Are we coding them accurately? What we're finding is we are coding them accurately. But we have students that are staying beyond that 4th year, and that's become very problematic for us because we have students that need to stay beyond their 4 years. We also are finding there are some districts that are not helping us with the tracking of kids because they're going there and they're not attending, and folks simply aren't attending to it on that end because they probably don't want those kids to be there. But we are following every rule and reg that we have our hands on, and we're doing it to the T. And we're doing the very best we can. But we have to, absolutely have to, do everything we can to improve that rate of graduation for special ed kids. So we are right now looking at ways to address that. And one of those ways is to graduate students based upon competencies rather than credits. And that's already what we do with most special ed kids. We're looking at doing that with isolated at-risk kids too, because some kids simply are not cut from that school mode, and we have to figure out a way for them to be able to succeed in a different way, because it isn't working for some of them right now. That's the last item I have for you. If you have questions for me, I'd be happy to try and help. Okay.
I don't have any questions. I just
Okay,
have a
good.
comment that I've looked at all the report cards of all the schools and the overall report card, not to jump ahead of
Yep.
the next
Yes.
speakers, but this is way below what
It is.
we've seen in the past 4 years. And I
It
just
is.
want to say, when I saw this, I was appalled and I'm disappointed.
Me too.
This is awful. This is not Amery's vision of student achievement. So
But please know, it's not about student achievement alone.
I know, but
It's about student achievement in graduation rates. The area that we lost the most points is the closing gaps of regular ed versus special education students. And I'm here to tell you, our scorecard that we have this last year will never be any higher than it is right now if we continue to keep kids beyond 4 years. That is true. And that is in conversation with DPI and in conversation with Chris Stratton, who's been here as a consultant. If we keep kids beyond 4 years, we will be penalized. Every single time. We have 10 kids in last year's graduating class, 8 of which are beyond 4 years because they're special ed.
Maybe Cheryl Wesley would probably be the more appropriate person to ask this, but is this because of the, have you made adjustments pursuant to the 2 Supreme Court decisions that came down last spring with regard to looking at IEPs on a more strenuous basis every year to make sure that they're progressing?
It's not about that, with all due respect. What it's about is this, us making the choice to keep kids here beyond 4 years.
Okay.
And we are making that choice. We want kids to stay here. But you are, again, penalized for every single one of those kids. We have 10 kids that are on that list last year. 2 legitimately did not graduate. They are regular ed kids. The other 8 are special education students. 3 of the 8 are students that are in the ID program. We are not going to kick them to the curb because they're age 18 and they've been here for 4 years. If we keep them, we will be punished for them. And I don't like using the word punish, but that is reality. And many students or many school districts are not keeping their kids beyond that age of 18. We are. If you want us to do something different to make that score go up, we'll do that.
Can I jump in? It comes down to like some of the ID kids. When and ID would be like intellectually disabled. It used to be called cognitively disabled. And these are students, when they're done with their 4 years, oftentimes we put them into a school to work program or like some states called like a vector program where they're getting training on how to live independently so they can hold a job. But if you do not remove them from school and say you're done by the time that senior year, they consider them not graduating, even though they're still going to school. It's just that we're decided to hold them for up to their 21st birthday to give them more assistance. And that's, I think, what we're saying is that you get penalized for that.
I guess I'll ask you the question. Do you want us to keep them or do you want us to send them on their way?
Yeah, and that's a rhetorical question. That's
I mean, that's really what it boils down to.
Right.
Well, I guess the cases that I read about had to do with the Free and Appropriate Public Education Act, where they just wanted to make sure that they were progressing every year, because some schools have IEPs, but they're not going anywhere. And then they enroll in another school and they excel and they should be into a different grade. So I guess I would just be more proactive.
I can tell you this: we write very strong IEPs in this district,
okay.
And there
so
are not. It is not the issue.
That's all I care about. Is that's not the issue.
But there are issues that I'll talk about in a few minutes that we really do need to address specifically for special ed kids. Okay. So I'm going to.
I share your disappointment because basically what has occurred here on this report card is we took the 21st best ACT performance in the state and canceled it by kids not graduating in 4 years, when in fact they shouldn't have graduated in 4 years. They should be staying because it's the right thing to do for kids. But the Governors Association has said, this is a directive to all states, you will measure graduation rate based on a 4-year rate so we can play apples to apples. Well, special ed kids and regular ed kids, that's not apples and apples, that's apples and oranges. So we're not going to play the game to make our number look better, we're going to do what's right for kids.
If I could redirect just to help to clarify, the school report card is one measurement, it's one snapshot, it's one data point. We look at multiple data points, and Mr. Durfler did mention the ACT scores, which our school has done tremendous on as of recent, and AP advanced placement exams are another one. So there's a lot of different areas that our students really do excel on. It doesn't mean that Amery High School is not a great school. It's just one snapshot, one measurement, one method that they do a measurement. And it does take so much into consideration, so much weight on the closing the gaps. So that the special ed.
I will lastly quickly say we had 92 test takers, 13 of which were special ed. That's 14.7% of your population. If you're going to say your scorecard's going to be strong based on 14.7% of the population taking the ACT that in most cases cannot read at level, your score is going to struggle. And that's exactly what's happened here. Thank you.
Before I jump into that, too, I want to address one other issue. When you look at a school report card from district to district, there's also a couple considerations because I'll give you an example. How well a minority student performs in Amery does not actually change our report card score because we have very few minority students. So they won't allow that report out because they're worried that that could identify the student. You see what I mean? So like you could look at that and say, oh, by minority students that are African American, it lowered the report card score. But they won't allow that because in most cases we have very few students that would fall into that category. That is not the case for us for free and reduced or special ed, but there are districts where it does. So I'll give you an example. It could be another district where your kids, those kids that maybe were special ed or free and reduced around us that scored considerably lower than us, but they get 100% on the score because they don't have enough kids to count. And that was a situation one time where there were some local districts around us that took a look at even the middle school how well our special ed performed on the state, and we got cited on something, even though our scores were double every special ed student's scores around the area. They just didn't have enough to count. And so that sometimes is thrown a loop because there are districts that get 100% on one area just because they don't have to worry about it. It's kind of a little flaw in the system. But the middle school, this is the report card up there. And we scored exceeds expectations, so we were very pleased with that, meaning that the state said that our students performed above where they would expect a student to perform. If you go to the next slide, you can see the celebrations there. Our report card scored exceeded expectation. The achievement score of 81.8 was the third highest score in our CISA of the 39 schools. So again, how well our students overall, including special ed, the school as a whole, performed. Our achievement was the third highest in our CISA. And then if you look at our overall score of 74.6, put us in the top 25% of schools in our CISA. And then Amery Middle School celebration, we have been rated significantly exceeds or significantly exceeds expectations every year they've had that report card. It is a score that's a little lower this year, and I'll explain why with our lowering the gap score. But and so that is a concern to us. But I also want to go on record saying that our report card score for the 4 years before was in the top 5% of the state and the highest in the entire CISA every year. So if you go to the next slide, areas of improvement that we need to make is the same thing that Sean talked about, was closing the gaps. And so that is closing the gaps between how well our special ed kids performed versus the non-special ed kids in the state. It doesn't necessarily say that our special ed kids are scoring below other schools around us that had a better score. It's just showing wherever they were the year before, they went down versus the state maybe went up. So your scores can be at different rates from other people. Or even schools that have really, really low scores, if their scores are starting to go up, they're narrowing that gap. They get positive points for that. It just shows over a 3-year trend what happened with that rate. And so closing the gap scores is something that we really need to work on in the middle school. And to be honest, you can hear the same thing over and over again. It's a district concern. Action steps. 1, we held a data retreat to study the data. It was a district-wide data retreat tearing into exactly what are some of the concerns. It was a great experience. We had staff from all buildings, administrators. That included Chris Stratton, who helped host it out of CISA. And then we set an improvement goal. At the middle school, that improvement goal is by the end of 2023 school year, we will close the gap at the ELA and math proficiency levels between students in grades 6 through 8 with disabilities and students without by 50%. And then after that, our next action step was to hold data retreat review meetings with the staff to discuss the root causes that took place. And then if you look, there's slide after slide after slide of a lot of different points. The first one is just kind of continue, and I won't go through them all, but these are all things that we are working on. And one was to promote a growth mindset, and that basically is saying that you work with all students, that every student can learn, and that you're going to set individual goals and work with those kids to all make goals of improvement. Again, if you go to the next slide, Jim, or this one, we need to provide more professional development on best practices of inclusion and differentiation. And then, again, there's a lot of points there. But basic, the middle school is we're really looking at saying we really need to have our special ed students in the regular ed classroom much more than they currently are. A lot of times they may get pulled out, and they get pulled out for a lot of really important reasons. Sometimes, and majority of the time, it's to make sure that those students are getting some reading instruction or math instruction at their grade level. However, in addition to that, we need to have them in the regular ed classroom as much as possible so they can hear what's being expected of them. It's not fair for them not to get exposed to all of that and then take an assessment at the end of the year. Of course, they didn't do as well as you would want. And so I think we're really looking at exactly what you're saying, Chelsea, is that we really need to sit down and say, how can we best serve these kids so they can make more growth? And so we have a huge action plan, and I just kind of highlighted a few of those points. But I'm excited about it and nervous about it too, because it's a lot of work. But we have a really good team that's working on this, and we're going to be coming out in January and laying it out a little bit more for the rest of the middle school on how we're going to tackle the problem. And that's happening in every building, and you'll find out more. Oh, I'm sorry. Any questions about that? No, I didn't.
Okay, I'm next. And I'm very proud to say that we have a nice, strong score of 81.9, which is just a little bit under significantly exceeding. But we are in the exceeds expectations. So that was great. Our area, if you go to the next slide, our area of celebration is that we received the overall score of the 81.9. And then secondly, our closing the gaps was our greatest strength. So we are really proud of that fact that we have lowered that gap for special ed and free and reduced kids. So the intermediate scored in math, and we've been working on our math scores. If you've remembered me up here the last 3 to 4 years talking about our math, well, this year the intermediate math score was 44.8 out of 50, where the state was 30.8 out of 50. And our ELA is actually something that we are looking at, we need to work on, but our ELA score was 37.6 out of a possible 50, and the state was 33.6 out of 50. So areas of improvement, what do we need to do? We scored the lowest in school growth in our reading language arts. Our score was 37.8 out of 50, and the state is 33.0 out of 50. We're still above the state, but it was our lowest score. And what did we notice about that? And this came out in our data retreat, is it's those students that are falling in the basic range on the forward test and our local benchmark. We need to make sure we're getting specific skill remediation, because we want them to move from basic into proficient. So that's really where we're going to concentrate. And then our overall score at the intermediate school was 9th out of 11 in our middle border. The one thing that is, this part of the state really scores well on the school report card. So even with my exceeds expectations score, we still scored 9 out of 11 in our middle border. So that is an area of improvement. Next. Our next steps through our data retreat, analyzing the school report card, analyzing our data, we set the goal of by May of 2019, 10% of the students will move from below basic to basic, basic to proficient, or increase the proficiency level on the forward exam in both reading language arts and math, so that 70% of our students will be at or above the proficient level. Any questions for me?
The years on the PowerPoint presentation should be 16, 17, not 15, 16, correct?
Where?
There.
Oh, yep.
Okay.
Yes. Sorry. 16, 17.
When you ask, your goal is 70%. Do you know where you're at right now with the number that are?
Yeah, that's a good question, Keith. Yes, I don't have that with me. That was in our data retreat when we looked. I
just wondering how big of a step that or jump that's going to be for you.
Yeah, I will look and get back to you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So does this report card, it goes through the end of the year then? So next year when you guys present the report cards again, it'll be
for this
at September or August 17 through May of 18?
Yes.
How does that run?
It's a 3-year average for the academic portions, but a 5-year average for graduation.
Oh.
So the hit we took on graduation at the high school will hit us for 4 more years.
Okay.
Right, but the next year's report card will. This is
Just be
from
1 year.
Last year is the most current data was from last year. We get them like we got them. It was after the board meeting last month.
Okay.
So.
Yes, they came out really late. They were supposed to be out in August.
One thing on OR is that the interesting part about how the state performs. Typically, one of the highest performing CISAs is CISA 11 in our area of the state, and one of the highest performing conference is the Middle Border Conference in that CISA. It's really interesting. And out of the middle school, where we were in the top 10 out of the 40, and almost all of them were from the 6 of the 8 middle border schools. So I had a meeting this morning with all the middle border principals, and we were all talking about different things and strategies everyone's using, and everyone's kind of seeing a lot of the same problems. It's pretty interesting. But so and I guess I would challenge you too. The scores. There are certainly areas that we want to improve, but like you look at our achievement score, and I said it's the third highest out of 39 districts. The third highest, meaning how well our kids overall perform, is the third highest out of 39 districts in the middle school. But the gap, though, is just hugely impacting us, so it's something that we have to work on.
And we've talked a lot about the gap. What resources do you need to help narrow that? I mean, I guess I'm just saying, do you need more personnel or?
I can speak to the high school. We need a reading program, I think 612. We have kids that are struggling readers, but we don't teach reading at the high school. That's a little late in the game for that. We would love to be able to, but we don't have staff that are able to. That's an elementary intermediate school endeavor typically. So yeah, if you're talking staff, that's exactly what we would need at the high school.
It's just that like with early intervention and title programs typically have ended after 5th grade. And so any of the types of things that we have to do, we have to kind of put it together on our own because the resources don't come down from the state for that. So that is certainly an area, too, that how to intervene with kids and response to intervention. We've talked a lot about response to intervention. The person up here now could probably speak more about response to intervention than any of us. But how well, we spend a lot of time trying to narrow down. We drill down to every single student and which students are struggling and come up with a plan for each one. Whether they're special ed students with an IEP or title kids or at the middle school at-risk kids. We use that term. It's kind of an old term, but kids that need intervention, and they have to go to intervention in all areas. But I think, too, as we move forward with the PLC process, where we start saying in each class, this is what you absolutely have to know, and if you don't, we are going to make sure you do through intervention. And how we're going to do that exactly, and every building will look a little different, but that's a good question. There probably will be some new ways of thinking or restructuring within what we do have to make that more effective. So don't have all those answers yet.
I know.
Good question, though. Intervention for each individual child is the key, is to just zero in on the needs of that student. And so if I were to answer that question, what do we need? Professional development, time for teachers to learn how to meet the needs of kids. And we do a great job here, but it's an ongoing, and it changes all the time, the new research and what's the best way to meet the needs of the kids. So with that being said, I will talk a little bit about, I don't get a formal report card because the first grade that is tested is the third grade, but obviously, the elementary school impacts the intermediate school's report card. And so I, too, am very excited that the intermediate school report card was exceeding expectations. We get an alternate rating. So every spring, what I need to do is turn into the DPI report on how our students did. So it doesn't mean that I'm not monitoring data or progress of our kids. But, Mr. Kukta, if you want to go ahead a few slides. Well, let's see. Back one more. Right here. So you've heard a lot of this already, so I won't say, I won't spend a lot of time. But basically, these are our celebrations. And in the area of reading and language arts, our kindergarten and second grade did awesomely well. We are looking at going above the 25th percentile in both reading and math. And our area that we need to focus in on is our first grade group. So if you go to the next slide, you will see, and I apologize, second grade there should say first grade. We had 63.7% of our kids score above the 25th percentile, and we're shooting for 80%. Although we did have a 20% increase in the amount of children that moved above the 25th percentile, but it definitely is an area of, I want to say, added commitment. However, when a student goes from kindergarten and they're learning skills to first grade, where they're putting those skills into reading and comprehension and word making, it takes until third grade. By third grade, we want kids to be able to read. So I feel like I can explain that that score that isn't above 80 percentile. We talked a lot about the gap. You've heard the gap. We at the elementary school, as Chris Stratton said, Cheryl, you're too high. The separation between your regular ed kids and your special ed kids is too high already by the time they transition from second to third grade. So again, that's where a lot of the new thinking is coming out. Keeping our special ed children in the core, so the meat of reading and language arts is the theme right now, and that sometimes is easier said than done, but we are trying to do that. The two areas that are concerning is when children are disruptive to other children's learning, and so that's a big concern, or it is so beyond them what is being taught, it's hard to keep them focused in the core. But we are being, that's what the latest research is saying, is keep your kids in the core. So we're all going to focus on that. So our next steps, as Tom had shared with you, we all participated in the data retreat. We all have big jobs ahead of us to do, and I've outlined some of the things that my staff that were present at the data retreat came up with, and the goal, and it seems far out, but Chris Stratton said, that's where you need to shoot because it takes time to get this done. By the spring of 2024, 80% of our third grade students will be proficient or advanced in the forward exam. And so I've got a list of action steps that my team came up with, but we will go back now to our elementary staff, share the process that we went through, and get their input before we totally say, this is what we're going to do. So, so we want to increase student engagement. We have some ideas there. I won't read all of it. We're going to, and we have been, you've heard a lot about the PLC process. That process has been amazing. It gives teachers time to talk and reflect upon students, upon interventions within the school day. And that is one of the things that we heard both times at the PLC conference that we went to in Minneapolis. Teachers need time to talk during the school day. You shouldn't expect them to do that hard work after the day is over. Not that they don't have hard work after the day is over, but that's where they talk about kids, they talk about assessments, they talk about interventions, they talk about the needs, they talk about curriculum and pacing, And we have that in place right now, so that's pretty exciting. And I am done. Unless you have questions of me, Mr. Benson is going to finish up with the district report card.
All right. The last report card is the district report card, which is a summary of all the kids, basically 3rd through 12. And you can see there that the score of the report card exceeds expectations of a 75.6. And again, on the far right, up there in the top upper right, you can see how those 4 scores broke down between achievement, growth, closing the gaps, and on-track readiness. And again, you can see that closing the gaps district-wide was the biggest concern. If you go to the next slide, when I had told you that I had used the word where our scores are 3rd highest, that's out of the CISA, was the middle school of the 39 districts, was 3rd highest. But overall, celebrations, Amery School District exceeds expectations. Overall rating put us in the top 35% of our CISA. Our achievement score was high. It was the 6th highest in the CISA and the top 20% of the state. So again, our kids, including special ed, every kid included, every score all added together for our district is in the top 20% of the state. So our students achieve at a much higher rate, considerably higher rate than districts in the state. However, closing the gap was a big issue and is bringing those report cards down. And what that means, not necessarily that our special ed kids aren't scoring high, it's just that the gap, they're scoring at a slower rate than the other students. The other students are gaining quicker than the special ed or free and reduced students. And so those are the 2 areas that we met that criteria on. So we are definitely needing to find a way to do that. And like Cheryl said, it's primarily right now we're really focusing on making sure that we have them in the core more. I want to go on record that we have awesome special ed teachers, especially the one that's sitting in the room right now looking at me talking. But they do a really, really good job. However, they cannot be expected to pull every kid out and make sure that they're learning the calculus that's going to be on the ACT, or the high math, all the algebra, all of the advanced languages, all of the different types of things that's just impossible. And so we need to make sure that those kids, though, are getting exposed more to the core. And that's really going to be the big focus. Otherwise, I think we've said just about everything unless you have questions. All right. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Next up, strategic plan, family and community collaboration. Mr. Benson, I think you're on again. Ms. Hendrickson.
All right. Tracy and I are going to cover this. A lot of the people or a lot of the community members are aware that for the last 2 years, I think, almost 3 years, the school district of Amery was going through some strategic planning process where we set specific goals to improve our district in all areas. And Tracy and I headed up one of the 5 areas called family community collaboration. And I'm just going to share with you what our overall goal is. We did present here last year, and then Tracy's going to kind of walk through some of the things that we've done. But overall, our goal for family and community collaborations is that the school district of Amery will advance strong two-way communication and collaboration systems to ensure all district stakeholders, including parents, students, staff, businesses, industry, churches, civic organizations, and local municipalities are informed and engaged partners with the school district. And we have a Prezi presentation that Tracy will start in.
So there were 3 action plans. So we'll start with the first action plan. Kind of in a nutshell, our first goal was to analyze and improve our current parent outreach, communication, and engagement. What we've finished so far, as you know, a year ago we did our community survey, analysis of all of our communication platforms, which we talked about at a previous board meeting, and had some pretty powerful results and found that we had great use of our communication platforms. So we've been through that. Ongoing, continuing to review the data from our communication platforms, everything from our website to the use of our school app, our social media platforms, Power School, parent-teacher conferences, all of our family events. So that's information that we need to stay on top of. We haven't changed our use of many of those platforms. I know there have been some changes with parent-teacher conferences based on numbers and parent attendance. But so we'll continue to keep an eye on all of those platforms as we move to what one of our final goals is for the action plan, and it's to create a formal communications plan for the district. And hopefully by this spring we have at least a good solid draft of that. But the goal of that plan is to create a solid framework, a good, clear, concise framework that guides us as to the messages that we want to put out there and how we're going to put those messages, and just gives us some good, solid direction. So Action Plan 1 is heading into that formal communications plan. So that's our next step with that one. The second action plan was to build and maintain relationships with stakeholders. It actually was a lot longer than that. I'm throwing things into a few words here. So implemented and ongoing. One of the things the committee talked about was continuing with Like a Warrior campaign, and we actually have some new things coming out. You might see, if you pay any attention when you're driving downtown, there are 1 or 2 new banners, 5 or 6 new signs out there. Some students are doing some projects. We have a little booster that we're giving it in January with sort of a scavenger hunt contest, if you will. So we're kind of keeping that alive and trying to give that a little bit of new life, do some things coming up. Our youth rec fair, community fair was something that the committee talked about. We wanted to continue that connection. We have another one of those planned for February. And Tom, you can...
Sure.
Go back, Jim.
Another type of thing we took a look at is getting our staff more involved in some of the community and civic organizations. And so we opened up the school district as a whole joining community club rather than just a few individuals, and trying to get more individuals attending those meetings. Meeting with the Amery Ministerium, and majority of that is probably the youth directors or pastors of churches. And they really like to have an open forum with us to talk about not only keeping Wednesday nights open for them, which we really work hard to do, but also how can we best serve their kids? We oftentimes, like right now, oftentimes in the middle school and other buildings, they'll come in and have lunch with their students, just working together. Oftentimes, too, we can say, well, these are some of the biggest problems we're seeing in our school, and then they can try to help address it with their students and their congregations. And then the Warrior Way. The Warrior Way is part of our PBIS, our Positive Behavior Intervention and Supports Program, and that's basically teaching every kid what's expected, training them, and rewarding and them for positive behaviors. The other thing, too, I just want to mention before we move on is that when we took a look again at our way that we communicate, we really found that majority of the non-parents of our community really wanted to get that information from the newspaper. So it's been really nice to be able to have cooperation with our local newspaper. And basically, if we send them things, they're going to really work with us on promoting a lot of the great things that happen. And oftentimes, too, then you take a look at between our app to the web page to Power School, and we really use advantage of Power School. It's not just looking at grades. We post every single assignment. You can see what the assignment is that day at home, down to the Facebook page and Instagram, all those different things. And it's no wonder all the different hard things and hard work that Tracy's doing that then the district has been awarded or received awards for having some of the best communications in the state. And so I think we need to give Tracy a round of applause for that. Goal 3.
You can hit it again, Jim.
Oh, and then in the future, the last goal was really taking a look at school staff and tours of our local industry and manufacturing, and then, of course, expanding of the high school community service day. And with the high school community service day, that was kind of one of the plans that we put in, wanted to expand that so that they would be district-wide. Really found that didn't work very well. Take all those kids out at the same time, all the busing out. And we basically broke it back and said community service, it needs to be done, and it has been done by all buildings. It's just done at different ways and at different times and in different manners. So that one kind of adjusted a little bit. But I'm really excited, too, about the manufacturing and industry. You would be amazed at how many people really don't know what happens in some of our big manufacturing plants around. And about probably 10 years ago, we started working with them when we took our staff in and took tours for those that would allow us in. And it was really refreshing and really interesting and opened up the lives of a lot of people. Our kids are probably right now more aware of some of that than the teachers are, just because of the way we've been working with the students. But I think that's another thing we're taking a look at, is trying to get back in and take a look at what's going on now, working with the AEDC and that. I do want to mention, too, the people that worked on our goal would be Tracy and myself, Alan Carlson, Katie Johnson, Paul Schaefer, who's the director of the AEDC, Laura Bussey, Janelle Leadholm, Ramona Lockwood, Amanda Azapira, and Elizabeth Bowman, and they all did a really good job. Oh.
What's the last one, Jim? Just the. I don't know if it's anything
sure.
different than what we've talked about. Kind of touched on that.
Yeah, I think we touched most on that. And the big thing, too, is the future, is what's happening with Warrior Manufacturing at the high school. And I'm telling you, after that presentation that Sean and Josh Ganji did, I am hearing so many really positive things downtown. Right now, I will be serving as president of the Amery Economic Development Corporation on the board, and it is a buzz all over the community. There's so many people wanting to get involved. It's going to be a really, really good asset for us. And what we're trying to show them is what is also happening, how that relates, what's going on at the high school with those great programs, what's happening with PBL in our building, and what's going on with the CRATE class, what's going on in AIM, what's going on all the way down in the Montessori and the project base. You're starting to plant that from young ages on, and so that's pretty cool. So, there's a lot of things going on. We've probably accomplished majority of the goals. There are some that are still in progress, and some that we'll be hitting later on in the cycle. Any questions about that? Okay.
Thank you. Up next, wellness policy.
Actually, could I switch E and G around? Because
Yes.
what I was about to just, the school mascot
Have at
idea seems to piggyback on school spirit and what they're trying to do. So, okay, so after a revealing of the supplemental school logo, it generated a lot of discussion and lots of different viewpoints regarding the logo. But one common request and complaint is that Amery doesn't have a mascot. And I know we used to, and I understand why that mascot is no longer used, because it's somewhat controversial. But there are a lot of schools and colleges that have, team names like Warriors, Chieftains, other type of Native American references. They have mascots, and they are politically correct, I guess, so to speak. And I think it would bring a lot of school spirit if we did, if we created some type of a committee. I think coaches and public students should all be involved. I'm not sure how to start this, so I just want to throw it out there to at least start looking at the concept of getting a mascot. I think mascots add personality to our school. They're a powerful marketing tool. To make people happy when they see them at games. Can give us a competitive edge on social media. They entertain, they engage the spectators, and they're just generally fun to have. And I think that there's a lot of mascots out there that, like I said, are politically correct, that could fit within the Warriors. And I'd like to, start a committee or start something to start to investigate that, having a mascot.
Well, the board may take action or just defer to me if you'd like to. I can coordinate a committee and have board representation, students, have the right people. Josh Gould probably to lead it as athletic director, probably Tracy to look at the public relations side of it, communicating it.
Yeah, and I know I've been approached by a couple coaches. I think coaches, seeing that they're typically sports-related identities, that coaches should be involved in. The public too. I think this is a big deal.
If you'd like, I'll just take it and run with it.
Sure.
Otherwise, if it's a board committee, every meeting has to be posted as a board-directed type of committee. So, how would you like?
Well, I think Chelsea probably wants to be part of that, so
I do,
I think that would be
but
appropriate.
I can just be a member of the committee. I don't,
Yeah, it's,
as a board member, not in a board committee,
well,
however you want to.
Yeah, we can get something organized
Okay.
before Christmas, or maybe
Right.
right after.
And one more thing that's kind of, that was brought to my attention by the last presentation was the theme was the Warrior Way. And it just reminded me of something I brought up, I don't know, a year or two ago, wanting to rename the road, the Warrior Way, instead of Minneapolis Avenue, I mean, our school address is, I don't know, something that's schoolish. I don't know.
I remember that.
A
That
lot
was
of,
good.
yes, it
Yeah,
was a
I
long
do.
time ago, and it just kind of fell off. I don't know what it takes to change our
Well,
address.
I did
but-
actually discuss this with a former city administrator, and we
Okay.
do have a new city administrator. I'll take that forward again.
All right. So,
I think the DOT's easier than the DNR, but I'm not sure.
well,
It depends on
even
the
if
day.
it's not our official address, we can still put up
We
a
can make
sign.
up our own address, can't we?
We can. I think the mail will get to us.
I think it's a great idea.
Well, I noticed other cities have streets named after their
Well, we got,
school. I mean,
somebody had to
I
name
just drove
Lombardi
down
Avenue.
Chieftain Avenue the other day, so, all
Yeah,
right.
good point.
That's cute.
Okay,
Okay. I'll,
you're still up.
do you want to?
Now you get your
All right,
wellness.
wellness policy. Okay. So I think it was by looking at policy 458. I believe it was Stacy Nelson that came forward and brought to our attention and created a student nutrition and wellness policy. I think it's set forth in policy number 458, and I just think that's a really important policy to, I guess, expand on. And the first thing I would like to expand on is implementing school garden language into the wellness policy. I don't have, I think next month, if the board agrees on moving forward with expanding a wellness policy for our students and staff, then I'll have some sample language up there we can do for a first reading. There's different levels of commitments. For example, the school garden does not commit the school to having a garden, but it just says that we're going to be open to it in the future. And it's my understanding that the clubhouse has a school garden, and I know AIM has some, I don't know, indoor growing experiments with lettuce. And so just simple language that indicates that, let's see here. That just shows that the benefits of school garden education and how it can directly impact, improve childhood health, and different ways that they can use the garden for education and promoting student wellness. Just something real simple. Like I said, there's so many different levels of commitments to how we can implement a school garden policy. So I'll have that posted next month as an action item to work on expanding my nutrition and wellness policy.
You go.
Chelsea, we also just heard from Kay Erickson came to speak to our students about the food shelf. She every year gives a big spiel to the kids before we start collecting food items. And we found out from her that we can bring our fresh lettuce and herbs to the food shelf on Monday morning. We did not know that. And so that is something that the AIM is also going to pursue, is that they can give it to the area food shelf.
That's great. And I know that I've also looked in my research and expanding just the overall wellness policy. There's also policies that I'll bring together or bring to the board probably next spring about incentive programs, for just to encourage healthier decisions for students, staff. Just, we want increased productivity, fewer sick days for everyone. So if think the more education, the better. That's a
Hear, hear.
for me.
Agreed. Okay. Anything else on that? Okay, we'll bop back up to support staff compensation and benefits.
Okay, this was something that was previously approved by the board, and I just wanted to make a clarification because there are two different sections for Clubhouse, and the old section in the main scale had only 2 employees remaining on that, and the new section, which was down below, I didn't put it up here, it's in last month's board book, but all of the new employees, new hires are under that new scale, just for clarification, and that new scale will be replacing the old scale in our compensation benefits portion of the handbook for support staff.
Okay. Any questions on that? All right. Certified staff contract updates.
Okay, and that was something discussed in closed session.
And we voted on it.
And it was voted on. And just to, I guess, report out, we continue to look at the migration from the old, from the former compensation plan for teachers and the migration that took place in 2014 to the new scale. And after researching and gathering data and information, we did look at making a couple of adjustments. So that's action that was taken by the board in closed session.
Okay. Property acquisition.
Okay, property acquisition. At this time, I'd like to request permission from the board to pursue acquisition of property, the Jorgensen Park, and I would put together a letter. I did meet with the new city administrator, Kim Moore-Sykes, and Fran Duncanson and David Chansky. We discussed a number of items, one being the potential acquisition of the property. We would essentially ask to take over the property, to take over the maintenance. We do have staff that can do that, and we already manage all of the property essentially adjoining that to the north and east of the Jorgensen Park. We pay rent for the park for softball to use it every year, and it's something that we'd like to consider. So with the board's blessings, I guess I would put together a letter of request for the city to consider purchase of Jorgensen Park to become school property.
So we talked about this in our building and grounds. Do you want to kind of update what we...
Well, I guess the brunt of it is trying to figure out what to offer or what to negotiate with the city as far as the value of it in doing that. And then some things with the softball association, because obviously they have tournaments with alcohol, and so there has to be some legal things that are dealt with there on that, so that we're not we don't want to shut the door on them. We want to make sure that it remains, basically its use stays the same. It's just that now we'll take it over and do the maintenance and that on it.
Yeah, and I think maintenance and probably some improvements that we might be looking at down the road that we may have some wherewithal to do that, whether it's lights or something like that. I think that their organization...
Or parking.
Or parking and all those types of things. We basically have maintained that for several years. I think just between the two of us, we wanted to make sure that nothing changed with the softball association so they can have all their tournaments and whatnot. And I think Mr. Cook to check that out legally, and it was
yes,
okay.
I did check with the Wisconsin Association of School Boards attorney, and there is state statute that addresses serving alcohol on school property may be done. It's in the statute with permission of the district administrator. So if the softball association requests to hold a tournament and serves alcohol, that actually would be legal. Okay. Smoking is illegal, and tobacco on school property, that's always, since the law went into effect for that. But again, the statute is very clear on what is permissible, and hosting a tournament of that sort by the Softball Association or any other group is permissible according to statutes.
And I think, correct me if I'm miss on this, but what's the benefit? The benefit is we pay rent every year, and it basically would be a wash this way that we think pretty close to be able to, so we can maintain it and and pretty much wash it and take it out of the city's hands. We use it a lot. And I don't think anybody would notice much of a difference outside of the
We're
city.
doing it before.
Yeah, so, and I think,
Mowing and that,
yeah, we were not
Was the city
talking
there
about
when you-
expending significant
Or when
amounts
you
of dollars,
talked
like
last week?
one.
It was just.
Is this
grounds
a
committee.
motion to allow continue negotiations or a motion to just give you?
I think it's just to continue
Okay.
negotiate. No. No, we just want to give him the okay to be
Yeah.
able to at least talk about it.
Okay,
Yeah,
well,
we're
I'll
not
make a
going
motion to continue negotiations.
I think because I think anything that goes over much more than $1 would be
Yes.
raise red flags with us. So yeah, it's more of a paper transfer. But yeah, just to at least talk with them, because I think at least on your end, it's kind of goofy to talk about it unless the board at least says, yeah, go. It's
What
fine
I
to
would
talk
do then
about
is
it.
put together a formal request and see if they want me to present that to their city council, or I'll present that to the city administrators.
And it may go nowhere. It's just
Making an offer.
just a discussion, I think. So,
Well, I'll make the motion to continue negotiations.
is there a second? All right. Any other discussion? All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Okay. There we go. All right. We can move on to early graduation requests.
All right, I'm here on behalf of 8 present seniors at Amery High School requesting to graduate early, which means January 12th is the last day of our second term, first semester. They will all be here for third Friday count, so they would all count for aid purposes. They've all declared their intents. I've met with all their parents, and they all have plans, so I'm asking for your permission for them to graduate early. They can still participate in graduation and senior trip and all the other senior stuff.
If I may, as a point of information, the second Friday in January is the second count date used for state aid, and so there's no impact on the aid that we receive by not having those seniors, because they go to school through the second Friday in January.
Okay. I'll take a motion for that.
I'll make that motion.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, that one's done.
Thank you.
Yep. Curriculum recommendations, Ms. Schock.
Yes, we have 5 classes to introduce you to tonight, and Mr. Durfler is going to do that. But I just want to state that the teachers went through all of the hoops we make them jump through, and they went to the Curriculum Oversight Committee and presented these 5 classes, and they were all approved.
Okay. In any particular order, we'll start with popular music. This was a proposal made by the music department. They're trying to service the needs of the non-traditional music student, because not every kid that's interested in music is in band and in choir. There might be kids that are in something altogether different. So they're looking at the creation of, the study of, the however you want to say it, of popular music. And they want to, it's not a classical version of your learning an instrument and playing an instrument. Perhaps you want to start a garage band, and this is what the curriculum becomes. Perhaps you want to study trends in popular music that have existed since the 70s. This is the place to do that. So this is a proposal from the music department for next year. I'm not sure if you want to take these one by one or all as a group. I'm not sure. There's 5 of them. You tell me how to...
I think you should keep going.
Okay. Good. Please chime in if you have questions. Guitar is a class we had. It's got to be at least 7 or 8 years ago now that we had it. It was last taught by Kathy Williamson, so that gives you a little bit of a frame of reference. We have 17 guitars sitting in cases. We're probably going to have to get them out and dust them off and tune them, but they are there. We don't have to add any instruments to do this. We're not sure how many budding guitar players there are out there, but we want to put that out and see how many kids are interested in taking a guitar class. So that's the second of the 5 proposals. You're going to have to get to the next one. There we go. AP Psych, the area in the conference in CISA where we are missing the boat. And from what I understand, AP, after ACT Aspire, is the next performance indicator that's going to be added to the scorecard. That was something that Chris Stratton shared with me. That was potential. We are the only school in the conference that has a higher than state average and higher than national average on pass rate. Our numbers of kids taking tests have upsurged. We do not have AP Psych. That's where most conference schools are getting most of the bang for their buck, so to speak. And we're looking at introducing AP Psych to our curriculum and have those kids take the test as well. It has to be audited, so well before we even met as a curriculum group, that was audited by the College Board. You have to meet certain standards to do that kind of a class. The fourth of the 5 classes is game design. Mike Rose made this proposal. He referred to it to me as Nerds of the Greater Amery Area Unite. And there are plenty of them. They are very interested. He made it a point of emphasis to me and to them. This is not that you're going to develop the next game and you're going to end up being the next Steve Jobs. This is intro to game design, and then you take it from there. Mr. Rose is very highly skilled in this area, and he has a lot of kids that are interested in getting after it in programming computers to, in essence, build games. So that's the proposal. That'd be in the area of business ed. And the last proposal is Intro to Programming. This is actually taught as a math credit. It can be aligned at the state for math credit, and Paula Stevens actually has a lot of education in this area, and she made the proposal to teach programming. Where, again, in any of these classes, we're not sure how many kids will be interested. We put it out there, see what kids want, and if they aren't interested, we don't run it. If they are, then we get it out there and they can take it. So these are the 5 proposals for new courses on the list.
Can I take a motion to accept them as a whole?
So moved.
Yes.
Okay, Keith, is there a second? Dale?
Second.
All right, any discussion, questions, or otherwise? Never had that fun stuff when
No offense
bothers
to
me
the
all the
nerds by
time.
any means.
Is game design, is that for apps, designing apps?
That's where he's heading,
That's-
because that's where the market's heading.
Yeah, that, I know, I've heard of a lot of 20-year-old millionaires and who created an app and sold it.
Well, there's the famous story of Michael Dell, and all of you are representing right now with your Dell computers. Michael always showed up late for supper because he was in the basement working on those computers, and his dad was furious about it, and he said to his wife, "What is he doing in the basement? Well, he's working on those computers. What are you wasting his time on that for?" Here's why.
Didn't get a good Christmas present that year, did he? All right, so any other discussion? All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? There you go.
Thank you.
And I don't think we have anything else to talk in closed session about, right?
No.
I think we're all done? We did. Oh, yeah, we do. Why don't you, I'll let you
I
talk
thought that
about
was
what
gonna
we've
be-
approved.
Well,
Yes. Why don't you pop that whole thing up there, right? Or, I don't know if you-
He's not present, but we have sort of an icon in the school district, someone that served the district since he was about 17. Bill Peterson announced his retirement as Director of Transportation at the end of June. And Billy's done a great job serving all of our students, our schools, our families, and so congratulations and good luck to Bill in his retirement at the end of the school year. We'll have a nice party for retirees near the end of the year.
And we did find out that even if we had voted not to accept it, he was still going to retire because we had thought about that. But
I just chuckle when I hear you say it's a party for Bill. Every day is a party for Bill.
That's right.
he'll have his own little
Golfing a
special
lot
wing at the
more.
University of Minnesota now, and we'll all be good. All right, so with that, I will take a motion to adjourn.
I'll make that motion.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor? Aye. Opposed?